when a baby who feared everyone suddenly reached for a stranger in a boardroom. No one expected what would happen next. The Millionaire CEO thought he was firing another employee. He had no idea he was about to face the most devastating revenge of his life, orchestrated by the woman he'd spent 2 years pretending didn't exist. The fluorescent lights of the executive floor buzzed with an intensity that matched the tension crackling through the air. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night, and Kesha Washington stood frozen in the doorway of Thompson Industries' main conference room. Her 18-month-old daughter, Zoe, wailing in her arms like a siren, announcing impending disaster. 5 men in expensive suits turned simultaneously toward the interruption, their faces morphing through identical expressions: surprise, confusion, then hardening into indignation. These were men accustomed to order, to control, to a world that bent to their will. A black cleaning lady with a crying baby represented chaos they hadn't authorized. How the hell did this woman get past security with child? Derek Thompson's voice cut through Zoe's cries like a blade through silk. The CEO of Thompson Industries rose from his leather chair, all 6 feet of corporate authority, bristling with barely contained fury. His fist slammed against the mahogany conference table with enough force to make the crystal water glasses jump. Call security. Now. Kesha's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady, a skill she perfected over 2 years of swallowing her pride, her pain, her rage. Sir, I can explain. My babysitter canceled at the last minute, and I had no one to leave Zoe with. She'll be quiet. I promise she'll be quiet. Quiet. Michael Thompson, Derek's eldest son, and the company's vice president, laughed with the cruel certainty of a man who'd never known consequences. At 32, he wore his privilege like cologne, expensive and impossible to ignore. That kid's been screaming for 5 minutes straight. What did you think this was? A daycare center. This is a Fortune 500 company, not a charity. What none of these men knew, what Kesha herself barely understood, was that Zoe possessed an almost supernatural intuition about people. Since birth, the child had exhibited an irrational fear of strangers that doctors couldn't explain and Kesha couldn't remedy. Neighbors, relatives, medical professionals. Zoe rejected them all with screams that could shatter glass and tears that seemed endless. The pediatrician had called it extreme stranger anxiety. Kesha's grandmother, before she passed, had called it the gift, the ability to sense a person's true nature before words or actions could lie. Whatever it was, it meant that Zoe spent most of her waking hours either clinging to her mother or crying at the approach of anyone else. But then, in that tension-filled conference room, something impossible happened. James Thompson sat in the corner, partially obscured by shadow, observing the emergency meeting about financial irregularities with the detached interest of someone whose opinion had never mattered much anyway. At 35, he was a younger Thompson brother, the minority partner, the afterthought in his father's empire. Where Derek was commanding and Michael was aggressive, James was quiet, contemplative, easily overlooked. When Zoe's crying finally paused, just for a breath, just for a moment, her dark, frightened eyes scanned the room. And then they found James. Time seemed to slow. The baby's expression transformed from terror to something resembling wonder. Her tiny arms stretched outward, reaching toward the stranger with an urgency that made every man in the room freeze. "What the hell?" Michael muttered, watching his uncle become the inexplicable object of the child's desire. That's not normal. Kesha felt her world tilt. In 18 months, Zoe had never, not once, not ever, voluntarily approached a stranger. She'd screamed at her own godmother. She'd hidden from Santa Claus at the mall. She cried through an entire family reunion, refusing to let anyone but Kesha hold her. And now she was practically throwing herself toward James Thompson. James stood instinctively, his movement uncertain, as if he were approaching a wild animal rather than a baby. His hands reached out, and Zoe all but launched herself into his arms, immediately quieting as she nestled into his shoulder. The crying stopped. The tension in the baby's small body melted away. She sighed, a deep, contented sound, and laid her head against his chest, as if she finally found home. "That's very strange," Derek observed, his eyes narrowing with the calculating precision that had built his empire. Children usually run away from James. He's terrible with them, always has been. But there was something stranger still, something that made Kesha's breath catch in her throat. As James held Zoe, adjusting his grip to support her small body, the baby reached up and tugged playfully at his brown hair. The gesture made him smile, a genuine, unguarded expression of surprise and delight. And Zoe laughed. It was a high-pitched, joyful sound that Kesha heard every day at home but had never, ever heard her daughter make in front of strangers. James lowered his head to look at the child, and that's when Kesha saw it. The crescent-shaped birthmark on the back of Zoe's neck. Distinctive, unusual. Something Kesha had always thought of as her daughter's unique signature was matched by an identical scar in the exact same place on James Thompson's neck. Same shape, same position, same size. The coincidence was impossible. The implication was unmistakable. "Mr. Thompson," Kesha heard herself say, her voice barely audible above the sudden rushing of blood in her ears. "We need to talk." But even as those words left her mouth, as 5 pairs of eyes turned toward her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity, Kesha realized that this moment, this unexpected, impossible, perfect moment, was the opportunity she'd been waiting 2 years to find. Because Kesha Washington wasn't just a cleaning lady who'd been forced to bring her child to work. She was a woman who'd spent 730 nights cleaning these offices, learning these people, gathering evidence, and planning her revenge of the patience of someone who had everything to lose and nothing left to fear. Derek Thompson thought he was dealing with an embarrassing personnel issue. He had no idea he was standing at ground zero of his own destruction. "Interesting," Derek said slowly, leaning back his chair with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a power play. "Very interesting indeed." His fingers drummed against the mahogany table, a rhythmic sound that seemed to count down to something inevitable. "Kesha, isn't it? That's your name." For the first time in 2 years of working in this building, 2 years of emptying trash cans, scrubbing toilets, wiping down desks, someone had bothered to ask her name. "Yes, sir," Kesha replied, watching as Zoe settled more deeply into James's embrace. The baby's small hand curled around his shirt collar. "Tell me about the child's father," Derek continued, his voice taking on that dangerous softness that preceded his most ruthless business decisions. "Where is he? Why isn't he taking care of his responsibilities?" The question hung in the air like a noose. Michael leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. The other executives shifted in their seats, uncomfortable witnesses to what promised to be an entertaining destruction of a subordinate's dignity. "He's not part of our lives," Kesha answered carefully, each word chosen with precision. "He made that choice a long time ago." Michael laughed, a short, derisive sound. "What a surprise. Let me guess. He disappeared the moment he found out about the pregnancy? Tale as old as time. These guys always do." The words hit Kesha like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were accurate. Michael had no idea he was describing exactly what happened, but in a way far more complicated and painful than his casual dismissal suggested. What none of these men knew, what Kesha had kept locked away like a shameful secret, was that she hadn't always been an invisible cleaning lady. 2 years and 3 months ago, she'd been Kesha Washington, junior intern in Thompson Industries' accounting department. She'd been a 20-year-old business student at State University, pulling a 3.8 GPA while working 20 hours a week. She'd been a young woman with dreams, ambitions, a future that stretched out before her like an open road. She'd been someone who believed in love. The company holiday party had been held at the Grand Marquis Hotel downtown, a glittering affair where champagne flowed and hierarchies temporarily blurred. Kesha had worn a dress she'd saved 3 months to buy. Simple, elegant, the deepest blue. She'd felt beautiful for one of the few times in her life. And that's where she'd met James Thompson. Not the shadow dweller she saw now, shrinking in the corner of his father's wrath. The James she'd met that night had been different, or so she'd thought. He'd approached her at the dessert table, commenting on her choice of the chocolate souffle over the creme brulee. They'd talk about everything except work. Books, music, their shared love of old movies, their dreams of traveling to places they'd only seen in photographs. "You're not like everyone else here," he'd told her as they'd stood on a hotel balcony. The city lights spread out beneath them like fallen stars. "You're real. You're genuine. Do you know how rare that is?" For a girl who'd grown up in the foster care system, bouncing between 7 different homes before aging out at 18, those words had been everything. Kesha had never known stability, never experienced unconditional love, never had someone look at her like she mattered. James had made her feel like she mattered. "I don't know what she's talking about," James finally managed to say, but his voice came out weak, unconvincing. The sound of a man who'd never learned to lie effectively. Zoe continued clinging to his shirt as if she could feel the tension radiating through the room. Her small fingers curled tighter around the fabric, and she made a soft cooing sound, content in her father's arms in a way Kesha had never witnessed with anyone else. Derek rose slowly, his movements calculated and predatory. At 58, he'd built his empire on the ability to read people, to identify weaknesses, to exploit hesitation. His eyes shifted between James and Kesha with surgical precision. "Interesting," Derek said, drawing out the word. "Very interesting indeed. James, are you absolutely certain you've never seen this woman before? Not once in 2 years of her working in this building?" "Dad," Michael interrupted, clearly impatient with the entire situation. He waved his hand dismissively in Kesha's direction. "Why are we wasting time on this? It's obvious what's happening here. This cleaning lady is trying to pull some kind of scam. She probably chose James as her target because he's more vulnerable." The word vulnerable dripped with such contempt that Kesha felt genuine anger spark in her chest. But it was the expression that flickered across James's face. Humiliation mixed with resignation, the look of someone accustomed to being dismissed, that made her understand the full dynamics of this family. James had always been treated as a lesser brother, the weaker son, the one who needed protection from his own decisions. And Derek had weaponized that perception, used it to control not just James, but everything that touched him, including her, including their daughter. "You're right, Michael," Kesha said, and the agreement in her voice made everyone in the room pause. "I did target James, but not in the way you think." She reached into her pocket, the same uniform pocket she'd used for 2 years to carry cleaning supplies, and pulled out her phone. "Do you want to see something interesting? These are messages James sent me 2 years ago." Derek's eyebrows rose fractionally. "What messages?" Kesha opened WhatsApp, her fingers moving with practiced ease. She'd looked at these screenshots so many times over the past 2 years that she'd memorized every word, every punctuation mark, every timestamp. "Should I read them aloud? Or would you prefer to see for yourself?" "Read them," Derek commanded, settling back into a chair like a judge preparing to hear testimony. Kesha cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Kesha, my father found out about us. He said if I don't break up with you immediately, he'll kick me out of the company and cut me out of his will. I can't lose everything I built. You have to understand. I have no choice." Sent December 15th, 2022 at 2:47 a.m. The room fell completely silent. James closed his eyes as if reliving his worst nightmare. Michael looked at his father, confusion creasing his features. "Wait," Michael said slowly. "You two knew about this pregnancy 2 years ago." But Kesha wasn't finished. "And this one's even better," she continued, scrolling to the next screenshot. "My lawyer said that if you try to sue me for child support, my father has enough attorneys to prove the child isn't mine. He said you'll never win against the Thompson family. You'd better forget this ever happened." Sent December 18th, 2022 at 11:23 p.m. She looked up on her phone, her eyes meeting Derek's. "But you know what's really interesting? It's this message. This one wasn't sent to me. This one was sent from Derek Thompson's corporate cell phone to James Thompson. Would you like me to read it?" Derek's expression changed minutely, the mass of corporate control slipping just enough to reveal calculation beneath. "Where did you get that message?" "James showed it to me," Kesha replied calmly. "At the time, he was desperate, trying to explain why he was abandoning me. He wanted me to understand that it wasn't his choice." She turned to James, who was trembling slightly as he held Zoe. "You remember, don't you? You cried when you showed me that message. You said you felt like a coward." James nodded almost imperceptibly, tears beginning to stream down his face. "So let me read it," Kesha continued, her voice gaining strength. "You're an idiot, James. Allowing the situation to get this far shows exactly why you'll never be capable of leading this company. Fix this now, or find another place to work. And don't give me any sentimental nonsense about love. Business is business." Sent December 14th, 2022 at 7:03 p.m. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Michael was staring at his father with growing discomfort. The other executives had stopped pretending to be anywhere else, fully engaged in the unfolding drama. "Dad," Michael said slowly, "is this true? You knew James had a daughter, and you forced him to—" "Business is complicated, Michael." Derek cut him off, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. "Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made to protect the family and the company. The timing was terrible. James was being considered for promotion. A scandal with an intern would have been. Protect the family?" Kesha laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "You abandoned an innocent child to protect your reputation. You let her grow up in poverty while you spent millions on cars and mansions and God knows what else." She pulled up another image on her phone. "This is Zoe's birth certificate. Look at the line where the father's name should be." Everyone leaned in. The line was blank. "Do you know why it's blank?" Kesha's voice cracked slightly, genuine emotion breaking through her control facade. "Because when Zoe was born, I still had hope. Hope that James would show up at the hospital, that he'd see his daughter, and remember that he'd loved me once. So I waited. I waited 3 days in that maternity ward before signing it myself. 3 days hoping my daughter's father would show up." James was openly crying now, his tears falling onto Zoe's hair as the baby slept peacefully in his arms, completely oblivious to the emotional devastation around her. "But do you know what happened during those 3 days?" Kesha continued, her voice strengthening with each word. "James sent flowers. Anonymous flowers with a card that said, 'I'm sorry. I love her, but I can't.' I still have that card. It's in Zoe's baby book, right next to her hospital bracelet, and the ultrasound pictures James never saw." The weight of that revelation settled over the room like heavy snow. Even Derek seemed momentarily moved, though he recovered quickly. "And you know what else I have?" Kesha pulled a folder of documents from her cleaning supply bag, the same bag she'd used for 2 years to carry mops and disinfectant. "I have 2 years' worth of emails that James sent to my work address. Yes, Mr. Thompson, he found out where I worked. He's been sending messages asking about Zoe, want to know if she was okay, if she needed anything. Derek turned to James, fury replacing any momentary sympathy. You were corresponding with her? Behind my back. I just wanted to know if my daughter was okay. James whispered. I needed to know she was alive, that she was healthy, that... And this, Kesha interrupted, spreading bank statements across a conference table with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Bank records showing anonymous transfers that appeared in my account. Every time Zoe got sick. Every time I post a photo on social media showing her looking sad or thin or wearing clothes that were too small. Michael picked up one of the statements, his expression shifting from dismissive to genuinely surprised. $500 when she had pneumonia at 6 months old. $300 when she broke her arm at 10 months. $1,000 on her first birthday. He looked at his uncle. These transfers came from your personal account. He was trying to take care of his daughter the only way he could. Kesha explained, always in secret, always afraid of what Derek would do if he found out. She pulled out more documents. I also have evidence that Derek threatened to disinherit James if he acknowledged Zoe, that he used company resources to have my internship terminated, that he essentially blacklisted me from other positions in the industry. Yes, Mr. Thompson, I tried to get other jobs. Every application was rejected, often within hours of submission. That kind of coordinated response doesn't happen naturally. Derek's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. And here's my personal favorite, Kesha continued, her confidence growing with each revelation. Emails from Derek to Human Resources, specifically requesting that the Washington matter be handled discreetly. Emails discussing how to legally terminate my internship without risk of a wrongful termination suit. Emails planning how to ensure I never worked in corporate business again. She spread these across the table as well. I have emails, text messages, bank records, recorded phone calls. Yes, I recorded some of our conversations, James. I'm sorry, but I needed evidence and witness statements from other employees who've experienced similar treatment. Michael was reading through the documents with increasing alarm. Dad, some of these emails were sent from the company's server. If this becomes public, it's not going to become public, Derek said firmly. His voice had taken on that dangerous softness again. Because Ms. Washington understands that going up against the Thompson family would be career suicide. She's shown us her cards. Now she wants money. So let's talk numbers. But Kesha was smiling now. Actually smiling. You think this is about money? Isn't it always? Derek replied, actually, Mr. Thompson, this is about justice. And I'm just getting started. The office door opened without warning, and a tall black man with silver gray hair walked in carrying a leather briefcase. His presence commanded immediate attention. The kind of authority that comes from years of winning battles that everyone else assumed were lost causes. I apologize for the interruption, the man said, his deep voice filling the room. I'm Marcus Williams from Williams & Associates. I'm here representing Ms. Kesha Washington. Derek stared at him in disbelief. How did you get past security? Your secretary was very helpful when I mentioned I was here to discuss paternity issues and potential corporate liability involving Thompson Industries. Marcus replied smoothly, setting his briefcase on the conference table. I hope you don't mind if I join this fascinating discussion. Kesha felt a wave of relief wash over her. Marcus Williams was a legendary civil rights attorney who'd agreed to take her case pro bono after she'd walked into his office 3 weeks earlier with her meticulously organized evidence. Mr. Williams, Derek said, attempting to regain control, I don't know what kind of misinformation you've been given, but... Actually, Marcus interrupted, opening his briefcase with practiced ease. The information I received is quite accurate and exceptionally well documented. He looked at Kesha with genuine approval. Ms. Washington has been extraordinarily thorough in her preparation. 2 years of evidence gathering. Quite impressive. Marcus pulled out a bound document nearly 2 inches thick. Here we have evidence of parental neglect, corporate manipulation, possible misuse of company resources, and, most interestingly, evidence that Thompson Industries may have engaged in discriminatory employment practices. Derek's face paled slightly. Those are serious accusations. Yes, they are, Marcus agreed. And every single one is documented with physical evidence, digital records, and witness testimony. He pulled out another document. This, for example, is a deposition from the HR director who processed Ms. Washington's termination. She's prepared to testify that she was explicitly told to fire Ms. Washington because of her situation with James Thompson. Her words, not mine. Michael was staring at his father with growing horror. Dad, what kind of legal exposure are we looking at here? And there's more, Marcus continued, pulling out additional files. Text messages discussing how to handle Ms. Washington. Emails coordinating her termination. Bank records showing that company funds may have been used to hire private investigators to track her movements. Oh, and my personal favorite, A recorded conversation where Derek Thompson explicitly tells James that the black girl and her bastard need to disappear. Derek shot to his feet. I never said that. Actually, you did, Kesha said quietly. December 20th, 2022, at 3:15 p.m. I was cleaning the executive bathroom adjacent to your office. You were on speakerphone with James. The acoustics in that bathroom are surprisingly good. She pulled out her phone and pressed play. Derek's voice filled the room. I don't care what you feel, James. The black girl and her bastard need to disappear from our lives. Pay her off, threaten her, I don't care. But handle it or I'll handle it for you. And you won't like how I handle things. The silence that followed was absolute. That recording would be inadmissible in court, Derek finally said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Perhaps, Marcus agreed, but it would be very admissible in the court of public opinion. Which brings me to the reason I'm here tonight. He pulled out one final document. Ms. Washington has a proposal. A very reasonable proposal to resolve the situation in a manner that benefits everyone involved. Derek sat back down slowly. What kind of proposal? Kesha stood, walking until she stood directly across the table from Derek Thompson. For 2 years, she'd moved through this building like a ghost, invisible and silent. But now, every eye in the room was on her. Now, she was impossible to ignore. I want 3 things, she said clearly. The silence that followed Kesha's demands was so profound that the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Derek Thompson stared at her as if she'd sprouted a second head. Then he laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound, the laugh of a man who crushed countless opponents and expected to crush another. You're insane if you think I'd agree to any of that, Derek said, his voice dripping with contempt. Director of Human Resources? A woman who couldn't even finish her college degree? A cleaning lady who brings a crying baby to work? He shook his head. You're delusional. But Marcus Williams was smiling. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a smile of a chess player who'd been waiting for his opponent to make exactly that move. Actually, Marcus said, pulling out yet another document, considering the strength of the evidence we have, Ms. Washington's proposal is extraordinarily generous. The alternative would be a very public lawsuit involving allegations of racial discrimination, constructive termination, child abandonment, and corporate malfeasance. He placed a press release on the table. The headline read, Thompson Industries CEO forced son to abandon employee's baby. Use corporate resources to cover up scandal. Derek picked it up, his face going from red to white as he read. This is blackmail. No, Marcus corrected gently. This is documented justice. And I should mention, this press release has already been sent to 15 major media outlets. It publishes automatically tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. unless I send a cancellation code. You can't do that. Michael protested. Actually, I already have, Kesha said, looking at her phone. Sent at 11:35 p.m. The story goes live in, she checked the time, 8 hours and 17 minutes. Derek's hands were trembling now, though whether from rage or fear was impossible to tell. This will destroy the company, destroy decades of work, all because of some... Careful, Marcus warned, his voice sharp. Any racial slurs right now would be very poorly advised, given that I'm recording this conversation. Derek closed his mouth with an audible click. 2 years, Kesha said, her voice soft but filled with steel. 2 years I cleaned your offices while you treated me like furniture. 2 years collecting evidence. Every email you thought was deleted, I retrieved them from the trash folders during my cleaning shifts. Every private conversation you had in your office, the cleaning staff hears everything. You just never bothered to check if we were still in the building. She walked around the table slowly, her cleaning uniform rustling softly. Every security code, every password left on sticky notes, every confidential document left out on desks. You thought I was just a cleaning lady. You never imagined I was documenting everything. Michael was looking at his father with something approaching horror. Dad, is all of this true? Did you really force James to abandon his own child? Business requires difficult decisions, Derek said, but his voice had lost its authority. You'll understand when you're running the company. No, Michael said quietly. I don't think I will. James, who had been silent through most of this exchange, finally spoke. His voice was thick with emotion, tears still streaming down his face as he held Zoe. Dad, I can't do this anymore. I'm signing the acknowledgement of paternity right now. And if that means you fire me, then fire me. James. No, Dad. Enough. James looked at Kesha with something like wonder. You really did this? Spent 2 years planning this? I spent 2 years watching my daughter grow up without a father because of him, Kesha replied, pointing at Derek. I spent 2 years working 3 jobs to afford her medical care, while you live in a mansion with 12 bathrooms. I spent 2 years being invisible so that one day I could be impossible to ignore. She turned back to Derek. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign these documents right now. James will acknowledge paternity. You'll authorize my hiring as Director of Human Resources with a starting salary of $150,000 annually. And you'll establish a trust fund for Zoe with an initial deposit of $500,000. That's extortion, Derek growled. No, Marcus corrected. That's barely adequate compensation for 2 years of emotional distress, lost wages, and reputational damage. And it's a fraction of what a court would likely award in a civil suit, especially given the racial discrimination angle, the abuse of corporate power, and the abandonment of a child. He pulled out his laptop. I've also taken the liberty of preparing a civil complaint that's ready to file. It names Derek Thompson personally, James Thompson, Michael Thompson, Thompson Industries, and several board members as defendants. The damages request is for $15 million. Derek's face had gone completely white. $15 million? That's on the low end, actually, Marcus said. But Ms. Washington isn't interested in destroying you financially. She just wants justice for her daughter. So I'd strongly advise you to take the settlement offer. And if I refuse? Kesha pulled out her phone. Then at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Every major news outlet in the country runs the story. Thompson Industries CEO covers up abandonment of black employee's baby. By noon, it trends on Twitter. By evening, shareholders are calling for your resignation. Within a week, corporate sponsors are pulling out. Within a month, Thompson Industries stock has plummeted and you're testifying before a congressional committee about workplace discrimination. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Derek's. Or, you can sign some papers tonight and we all walk away. You get to keep your reputation, your company, and your precious family legacy. I get to ensure my daughter has the future she deserves. It's a pretty good deal, considering I could take everything. Derek looked around the room, at Michael's shocked face, at James crying while holding his newly discovered granddaughter, at the other executives who were carefully avoiding eye contact, at Marcus Williams with his briefcase full of evidence. For the first time in his professional life, Derek Thompson had been comprehensively outmaneuvered. Fine, he said, the word bitter on his tongue. Where do I sign? 30 minutes later, documents had been signed. James had officially acknowledged paternity of Zoe Thompson. Derek had authorized Kesha's hiring as Director of Human Resources. Bank transfers had been initiated for retroactive child support and trust fund establishment. Marcus Williams packed his briefcase with satisfaction. My office will follow up tomorrow with additional paperwork, but the primary matters are resolved. As the executives filed out of the conference room, still in shock, Kesha took Zoe from James's arms. The baby stirred but didn't wake, content and peaceful. Kesha, James said softly, I'm so sorry. For everything. I should have fought harder. You should have, Kesha agreed. But you didn't, and I'm not interested in should-haves right now. I'm interested in making sure Zoe grows up knowing her father. If you want to be part of her life, really be part of her life, then you need to prove it. Actions, not words. James nodded, wiping his eyes. I will. I promise. Whatever it takes. Derek, gathering his belongings with shaking hands, paused at the door. You destroyed me tonight. No, Kesha corrected. You destroyed yourself 2 years ago when you put your reputation above your granddaughter's well-being. I just made sure there were consequences. As she walked out of that conference room, Zoe sleeping peacefully in her arms, her new employment contract in her bag, justice finally served. Kesha felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. Hope. Kesha Washington sat in her new office on the 15th floor of Thompson Industries, reviewing employment contracts with a meticulous attention to detail that had made her one of the youngest directors of human resources in the company's history. The office was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a mahogany desk that had once belonged to a senior vice president, and in the corner, a specially designed play area where Zoe spent her afternoons while Kesha worked. Mama, Zoe called out, holding up a colorful block tower she'd built. At 2 years old now, she was talking in full sentences and had completely overcome her fear of strangers. That's beautiful, sweetie, Kesha said, smiling. A knock on the door interrupted them. James entered, carrying 2 coffee cups from the cafe downstairs. Thought you might need this. Budget meeting in 20 minutes. Over the past 6 months, James and Kesha had slowly, carefully rebuilt their relationship. Not the romance that had died 2 years ago. That was gone, buried beneath too much pain and betrayal. But they found something better. A respectful partnership focused on Zoe's well-being and building a better company. James had surprised everyone, including himself, by standing up to his father. He demanded greater say in company operations, pushed for more progressive workplace policies, and when Derek had resisted, James had threatened to walk away with half the company's client base. Derek had relented. Then 3 months ago, he announced his retirement for health reasons. Health reasons that had nothing to do with his physical well-being and everything to do with the stress of being systematically outmaneuvered by his own son. Derek called again. James said, settling into chair across from Kesha's desk. He wants to meet Zoe. Kesha looked at her daughter, who was happily playing with blocks, completely unaware of the complicated family dynamics surrounding her. Maybe when he learns that being a grandfather is a privilege, not a right. James nodded. He's learning, slowly, very slowly. Michael had proven to be more adaptable. After the initial shock wore off, he'd actually apologized to Kesha, a genuine, heartfelt apology that had surprised them both. He'd started attending family therapy with James, working through decades of toxic family dynamics. Thompson Industries itself had undergone massive changes. Under Kesha's guidance, the company had implemented new anti-discrimination policies, expanded parental leave, created an on-site childcare center, and established a foundation to support single parents pursuing their education. The woman who'd been fired for getting pregnant was now ensuring that no employee would ever face that situation again. "How's the scholarship program coming?" James asked, referring to Kesha's newest initiative. "We've funded 15 students so far." Kesha replied with satisfaction. Single parents who had to drop out of college. We're paying their tuition, providing childcare, and offering paid internships. 3 of them will graduate this year. James smiled. Derek would have never approved that program. "Derek isn't in charge anymore," Kesha pointed out. "We are," because that was the final piece of Kesha's revenge, the part she hadn't revealed in that conference room 6 months ago. She hadn't just wanted acknowledgement and financial support. She wanted to change the entire system that had nearly destroyed her, and she was doing it. The company that had fired her for being pregnant was now a leader in supporting working parents. The family that had tried to make her disappear was now publicly celebrating her leadership. The CEO who called her daughter a bastard had been forced into retirement, replaced by a more progressive leadership team. Derek Thompson had tried to erase Kesha Washington from existence. Instead, she'd become the most important person in the company's transformation. "You know what the best part is?" Kesha said, looking out at the city below. "He thought I wanted money or power. He never understood that what I really wanted was to make sure no other woman ever has to go through what I did." James nodded. "You're changing the world, Kesha, one policy at a time." "Daddy," Zoe called out, having learned to call James by that name 3 months ago after considerable encouragement. "Come play." James got down on the floor with his daughter, building block towers with the patience and love he denied himself for 2 years. Watching them together, Kesha felt something she thought was impossible. Forgiveness. Not for Derek, never for Derek, but for James, who'd been as much a victim of his father's cruelty as she had been. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus Williams. "Just heard from the governor's office. They want to talk about implementing your parental support policies statewide. Congratulations, you're changing the world." Kesha smiled. 2 years ago, she'd been invisible. She'd been a cleaning lady who nobody noticed, nobody valued, nobody remembered. Today, she was impossible to ignore. Derek Thompson had tried to destroy her to protect his reputation. Instead, his cruelty had forged her into something stronger than he could ever imagine. The invisible woman had become the voice for everyone who'd ever been dismissed, ignored, or underestimated. And that was a real revenge. Not destroying her enemies, but building a world where their kind of cruelty couldn't exist. "Mama, look." Zoe called out, showing off another tower. Kesha looked at her daughter, healthy, happy, growing up surrounded by love and possibility, and realized that this was what justice looked like. Not courtrooms or revenge, but a little girl who would never wonder if she mattered, who would never feel invisible, who would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for her and won. Derek Thompson called once more that evening. This time, Kesha answered. "Hello, Derek." "I've been thinking," the old man said, his voice weaker than she'd ever heard it. "Maybe it's time I met my granddaughter properly. If you'll let me." Kesha looked at Zoe, playing happily with James on her office floor. "Maybe, when you can prove you've changed. When you can show me that you understand why what you did was wrong." "I do understand," Derek said quietly. "It just took me too long to admit it." "Then we'll see," Kesha replied. "We'll see if your actions match your words." She hung up, knowing that true change took time, that some people never change at all, but willing to give him the chance she'd never been given, the chance to prove that people could be better than their worst moments. Because that's what separated her from Derek Thompson. He'd use his power to crush others. She used hers to lift them up. And in the end, that made all the difference. Epilogue. 2 years after that fateful night in the conference room, Thompson Industries had been completely transformed. Kesha Washington had been promoted to Chief People Officer, overseeing all human resources operations for the company's 17 locations. Derek Thompson lived in quiet retirement, slowly building a relationship with his granddaughter under Kesha's careful supervision. James Thompson served as CEO, leading the company toward a more ethical, more compassionate future. Michael Thompson ran international operations and had become one of Kesha's strongest allies in implementing progressive workplace policies. And Zoe Thompson, now 4 years old, grew up in a world where she was loved, valued, and celebrated by a family that had learned, painfully, slowly, but genuinely, that love and justice were more important than reputation and pride. Kesha Washington's story became the subject of articles, podcast episodes, and eventually a book about workplace justice and single parents fighting for their rights. She spoke at universities, advised legislators, and mentored other women facing similar challenges. The invisible woman had become impossible to ignore, and every time someone asked her how she'd done it, how she'd taken down a corporate empire and rebuilt in her image, Kesha gave the same answer. I spent 2 years being underestimated, and I used every single moment to prepare for the day when I couldn't be dismissed anymore. Never underestimate someone just because they're cleaning your office. They might be planning to change your world.